This first clip is to inform those that don't know where and how the Ukraine-Russia war started. And I know there's a lot of podcasts and YouTubers such that are covering the dangers of this war and who is responsible and whose administration did that much. And we know who they are because they're still in power right now as we speak. I'm also going to cover some of this retaliation that they're talking about over in Russia, because if it was us and China was at our borders and causing conflict, we'd be doing the same thing. So it is U.S. policy that has started this shit and put us in danger.
Let me just explain in 2 minutes the Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification. The U.S. then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power. The expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. Then the U.S. led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. What it did was trigger the U.S. putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. In 2004-05, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election and he became president, and in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. So they made the new government. The U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. On December 15th, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. The special military operation started, and 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the United States and Britain said, no way. You guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front. You're all going to die. But we got your back. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave. Absolutely ghastly. We have to understand we're not dealing with, as we're told every day, with this madman like Hitler. This is complete bogus, fake history that is a purely PR narrative of the U.S. government. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them.
In the year 2000, when Putin had just come to power, he asked Bill Clinton to let Russia join NATO. Yes, Putin wanted to join NATO. But Clinton told him something that pissed him off so much that Putin made it his life's mission to destroy NATO. Here is what happened. When Putin had just become the president, he said, "Russia is part of the European culture, and I cannot imagine my own country in isolation from Europe. NATO countries were weak and highly dependent on the United States for their security. But Russia joining NATO would have challenged United States authority and would have made it ineffective since the U.S. would have to consult Russia. That's when Putin realized that NATO is just the U.S.'s tool to project power and not an alliance where Russia is welcome."
These two have done more to discredit our country and ruin this nation than anybody else besides Obama.
Today we are holding a scheduled meeting. The meeting is called the Permanent Meeting on Nuclear Deterrence, and it is held twice a year. And on today's agenda, we have an issue related to updating the basic principles of state policy on nuclear deterrence. Together with the military doctrine, this is the document that officially defines and details Russia's nuclear strategy. First of all, it lays down the basic principle of the use of nuclear weapons, namely that the use of nuclear forces is an extreme measure to protect the country's sovereignty. I underline that we have always approached these issues in a highly responsible manner. Well aware of the nuclear triad remains the main guarantee of the security of our state and our citizens and an instrument for maintaining strategic parity and the balance of power in the world. At the same time, we see that the current military and political situation is changing dynamically, and we must take this into account. This includes the emergence of new sources of military threats and risks to Russia and our allies. It is important to anticipate the development of the situation and to adapt the provisions of the strategic planning document accordingly. Over the past year, the experts of the Ministry of Defense, following the results of this work, a number of clarifications have been proposed regarding the conditions for deploying nuclear weapons. For instance, the draft of basic principles extends the category of states and military alliances that are subject to nuclear deterrence and complements the list of military threats that require nuclear deterrence measures to be neutralized. I would also like to draw your particular attention to another issue. The amended document defines aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, though with the involvement or support of a nuclear state, as a joint attack against the Russian Federation. It also explicitly defines the conditions for Russia's transition to nuclear weapons use. We will consider such a possibility upon obtaining reliable information on the massive attack launched by aerospace weapons, crossing of our state border. I am referring to strategic and tactical aircraft, cruise missiles, UAVs, hypersonic, and other aircraft. We reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in the case of aggression against Russia and Belarus as a member of the Union state. All the issues have been discussed with the Belarusian side and with the President of Belarus. It also applies if an enemy, using conventional weapons poses a critical threat to our sovereignty. I would like to conclude by noting that all the clarifications are highly accurate and correspond to the current military threats and risks against the Russian Federation. Let us proceed with our work.
What this administration, the UN, the WHO, and all them stupid fucks, you're not going to be crawling out of your bunkers in 20 years because there's not going to be anything left anyway.
Up with education, down, down with deportation. Up with education, down, down with deportation.
I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now.
We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
I hear a lot of people say, the talk of a mass deportation is racist. It's threatening to the immigrant community. It's not threatening to the immigrant community. It should be threatening to the illegal immigrant community.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
It is not an emergency. We are not facing a crisis.
We have a president of the United States who has created a fiction about a crisis at the border, and he has held up the United States government and its workers around his vanity project called a wall.
To the criminal cartels in Mexico. You smuggled enough fentanyl across this country to kill 148,000 young Americans. You have killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world combined. And that's when President Trump gets back in office. He's going to designate you a terrorist organization, and he's going to wipe you off the face of the earth. You're done. You're done.
The idea that he is trying to say that we have people that are trying to invade our country to commit mass crime is a crisis of his own making. I specialize in transnational criminal organizations. Yeah. That wall ain't gonna stop them. No.
There's a 600% increase in sex trafficking of women and children. Border Patrol has arrested more terrorists coming across the border in 1 month than Trump had in 4 years. This is the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever had. Donald Trump will be the president, and I'll be in the middle of running the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen.
I am not for a wall. We don't need to build a wall. This is a crisis of his own making. The President of the United States has a vanity project that he doesn't want to give up. It's the President's vanity project. This issue is about a vanity project for this president. Right. The president's vanity project? Let me be very clear. I'm not going to vote for a wall under any circumstances. It will not end with a wall. It will not end with a wall.
It will not end with a wall?
No.
All right.
He comes back, I come back, we fix this shit.
There is some laughter that makes you laugh along and makes you feel good, and then there's some that's disgusting. And I'm glad we don't have to hear. Let me make it perfectly clear as she imitates Obama and his bullshit.